The alien council, certain of their superiority, mocked Earth's fleet, dismissing it as a joke. They laughed at the sight of the old, battered human ship approaching their armada. But they stopped laughing when that ship appeared directly above. Them and Earth's hidden strength became painfully clear. The alien council's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound of deep mockery. Across the holographic table, the images of their advanced fleet lit up, showing their ships poised for victory, each one gleaming with technology that was far beyond anything Earth had ever created. The humans, on the other hand, had sent an old, rusted ship, an ancient dreadnought that barely looked functional. "I can't believe this is it," one council member chuckled. "This is their fleet? The great Earth military? A joke." The others joined in, their voices filled with condescending amusement. The High Commander, standing tall at the head of the table, grinned as he watched the image of the human ship flicker across the screen. It was a ship from a forgotten era, its hull scarred with years of neglect, its weapon systems outdated, its engines sputtering with age. It looked like it would fall apart at the slightest touch. "Do they honestly think this is a challenge?" the High Commander scoffed. "This pathetic ship can't even match our smallest vessel." A few members chuckled, nodding in agreement. The atmosphere in the room was one of confidence, even arrogance. They had been hunting down and annihilating entire civilizations for centuries. This would be no different. As they watched the human ship inch toward them, slowly closing the distance, their mockery grew louder. "We'll let them come," another council member sneered. "They'll get close, we'll fire a few warning shots, and they'll scatter. A simple, easy victory." The High Commander leaned forward, his hands resting on the table, a wicked smile forming on his lips. "And if they don't scatter?" one of the other council members asked. "We'll destroy them, of course," the High Commander said with a cold, dismissive wave. "It won't take more than a few minutes." But then, just as they were about to continue their mockery, a sudden flash of light interrupted their smug discussion. The human ship surprisingly and possibly appeared directly above the fleet within their range. It didn't drift. It didn't hesitate. It simply appeared, its massive rusted hull hanging above them like a dormant giant, waiting. There was a moment of silence, the kind of silence that precedes an irreversible change. The council members stopped laughing. "What is this?" the High Commander muttered, his tone suddenly less certain. "How did they—" The screens flickered again, and before they could even process the implications, the human dreadnought fired. A barrage of energy beams erupted from the ship, piercing through the cold vacuum of space toward the alien fleet. The first shot hit a cruiser dead center, the impact causing it to shudder violently before exploding in a burst of light. "What the hell?" one of the council members shouted, his eyes wide with disbelief. The High Commander's heart raced. This couldn't be happening. The dreadnought's ancient weapons weren't supposed to be capable of this kind of precision. It was rusted, primitive. They had calculated its firepower and discounted it as nothing more than an old warship. And yet, here it was, systematically tearing apart their fleet, one ship at a time. The next shot came even faster. Another alien vessel was obliterated, its shields no match for the accuracy and power of the dreadnought's weapons. It was as if Earth's ship had been designed to exploit every weakness in the alien armada, and it was doing so with brutal efficiency. They thought it was mercy. It wasn't. The words rang in the High Commander's mind. Earth hadn't come to negotiate. Earth hadn't come to plead. They had come for vengeance, and they were delivering it with quiet, calculated precision. The comm officer frantically scrambled to respond. "Sir, the fleet is losing formation. We're being picked off one by one. Our shields aren't holding up." "They're not even fighting back," the High Commander said, his voice hollow. "They're not attacking. with sheer force. They're dismantling us with precision, targeting the weak spots one ship at a time. How? One of the council members asked, his voice tinged with panic. How is this happening? The High Commander clenched his jaw, his thoughts racing. He had seen warships rip through planets before, had witnessed the destruction of entire civilizations, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing had prepared him for Earth's ruthless efficiency. The human dreadnought wasn't just a ship. It was a message. A message that would forever change the galaxy's perception of Earth. We didn't just underestimate them, the High Commander said, his voice barely a whisper. We ignored them. Shields are down to 20%, the comm officer reported, his voice trembling. We're losing control. The High Commander stared at the screen, the dreadnought's weapons still firing with deadly accuracy. His heart sank as the last of their ships fell one by one. He had underestimated Earth, and now the empire he had built was crumbling before his eyes. The last alien vessel, the pride of their fleet, exploded in a brilliant flash. The dreadnought's silent assault was complete. The High Commander was left standing in the quiet aftermath, surrounded by the remains of what had once been a mighty empire. And that was before Earth even responded. The High Commander stood at the helm of his command room, his eyes fixed on the holodisplay. It was a scene of destruction, alien ships falling one after another, their sleek, invulnerable bodies torn apart by the very ship they had underestimated. Earth's dreadnought, which had once seemed like little more than an obsolete relic of a forgotten war, was now a harbinger of their doom. The once mighty alien fleet, so advanced and so powerful, was breaking apart in real time, its grand designs crumbling under the relentless assault of a rusted, ancient warship. The High Commander's breath was shallow, his mind struggling to process what he was seeing. Every instinct he had told him that this couldn't be happening. How could a species so primitive, a ship so outdated, be causing this much destruction? It was the kind of defeat that crushed the soul. He had ruled for centuries, watching entire civilizations bend before his empire's power. He had never been faced with an opponent like this. The humans had proven that power was not solely the domain of technology. There was something deeper at play here, a cunning, a strategy, a long-forgotten wisdom. And Earth had known it all along. Sir, shields are collapsing on the remaining fleet, one of the officers reported, his voice a mixture of fear and disbelief. We're losing them, one by one. The High Commander's fists clenched. The once unbeatable ships, the pride of their empire, were now nothing more than floating wreckage. The last of the alien fleet, barely intact, struggled to maintain any semblance of order as the human ships' precision strikes destroyed their formations. How is this happening? The High Commander muttered, his voice hollow. He wasn't speaking to anyone in particular. The question was more of a desperate plea. How could we have been so wrong? We thought they were weak, another council member whispered from behind him. The words were heavy, laden with a realization that had come far too late. We thought their silence was a sign of fear. But now, another massive explosion on the screen cut the thought short. The alien fleet's flagship, a ship that had been designed to dominate, to instill fear across galaxies, was now nothing more than an expanding cloud of debris. A single blast from Earth's dreadnought had obliterated it, and now there was nothing left but silence. They thought it was mercy, the High Commander murmured, staring at the wreckage on the screen. He could barely hear the words he spoke, the reality of the situation weighing down on him. It wasn't. In the span of mere minutes, Earth had turned the tide of battle. What had started as mockery, as condescension, was now a cold lesson in the power of underestimation. The High Commander's mind raced to find a solution, to find a way to turn the situation around, but every plan he formulated felt hollow, useless. There was no hope for escape. The dreadnought had already decimated their most powerful assets. The galaxy's greatest empire was crumbling in front of his eyes, and there was no way to stop it. Do we attempt to retreat? One of the council members asked, his voice tight with panic. We have to get out of here. There's no way we can win now. The High Commander's gaze remained locked on the flickering screen, his mind still processing the enormity of their loss. The last of the alien ships were fleeing, their engines sputtering as they attempted to escape the inescapable. Earth's dreadnought wasn't chasing them, it was calmly, deliberately dismantling their fleet, one ship at a time, without a hint of rush, without the need for any grand attack. The message was clear. Earth didn't need to annihilate them in a single strike. They had already won. They were playing a game of patience, and they had already outlasted them. No. The High Commander replied, his voice firm despite the heaviness in his chest. We don't retreat, we face them. If this is the end of our empire, then we stand and face the consequences. Another council member spoke, his voice trembling. But we'll be destroyed, every last one of us. Earth will show no mercy. The High Commander turned to him, his face grim, but his eyes were hard. I'm not asking for mercy. I'm asking for the dignity to face what we've done. Earth has shown us that silence can be just as deadly as firepower. That patience can be more powerful than any weapon we possess. We've underestimated them. For far too long, now we will face them on their terms. There was a long pause. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. Do you think they'll destroy us completely? One council member asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The High Commander's answer came slowly, almost reluctantly. I think they've already done it. The room was silent again, the weight of his words sinking in. The Council had conquered countless worlds, destroyed civilizations, and left a trail of wreckage across the galaxy. And yet they had never faced anything like this. Earth had not just resisted. They had outclassed them, outthought them, and now they stood at the edge of total destruction. What they thought was a rusty relic had proven to be the most effective weapon they had ever encountered. The High Commander took one last look at the screen. The dreadnought, though battered and scarred from years of disuse, was still firing, still exacting its quiet vengeance. The remnants of their fleet had been scattered, their pride shattered, their power reduced to dust. The silence of Earth was no longer a sign of weakness, it was a declaration of endurance, of strength, of patience. Earth had been waiting for this moment, waiting for the right time to strike. And when it did, they did not rush. They did not attack with reckless fury. They simply showed that the real power lay in their control of time, in the way they played the long game. The High Commander stood tall, his last ounce of defiance steeling him for what was to come. And that was before Earth even responded. Alien fleet was now a scattered wreck, remnants of its once feared armada floating aimlessly in the cold vacuum of space. The High Commander stood before the control panel, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. He could still hear the echoes of Earth's dreadnought's blasts, the destruction, the unbearable precision. They had sent their finest ships to crush the humans, and yet now, here they were, broken and outmaneuvered by a ship that should have been nothing more than an antique. Report. The High Commander barked, his voice strained. The comm officer, his face pale and gaunt, turned toward him. Sir, the last of the ships are in retreat, but they are badly damaged. The dreadnought is still out there monitoring us. Our comm systems are completely offline, and the engines are barely functioning. The High Commander's chest tightened. He had seen defeat before. He had been the architect of countless wars, the destroyer of entire civilizations. But this was different. This wasn't just a defeat. It was a humiliation. They've shattered our fleet. The High Commander muttered under his breath, staring at the wreckage on the screen. And they did it without even trying. The silence in the room grew heavy. The once confident council members now sat in the back, their eyes wide, their voices hushed. They had expected the humans to be a fleeting nuisance, a minor disruption in the grand scheme of their empire. But Earth had not just resisted, they had defeated them, obliterated their forces with ruthless, methodical precision. The dreadnoughts. Attacks were calculated, its movements deliberate. Every shot, every strike had been perfectly executed. The humans weren't fighting with brute force. They were fighting with intellect, with patience. We can't let this stand. One council member finally spoke up, his voice trembling. We cannot let Earth's defiance go unanswered. If we do, we'll lose everything. The High Commander turned sharply, his eyes hard. There is nothing left to fight for. Look at us. We've lost. The Empire is gone. His voice cracked as he said the words. There was no pride left in his heart, no strength. He had led them to this monumental failure. He had dismissed Earth as weak as a relic, and now the remnants of their once mighty fleet drifted helplessly in space, with Earth's dreadnought still standing tall, watching them as if it were a predator toying with its prey. Another council member, a younger figure, stood and spoke with some urgency. We can't just sit here and wait for them to finish us off. We need to regroup, find a way to strike back. We can't let the galaxy think we were beaten by them. But the High Commander shook his head slowly, his voice quiet but firm. We cannot defeat them. We thought our superiority was enough to crush them. We thought that a simple show of force would make them bow. Instead, we've proven to them that their silence was a weapon. Their patience was a weapon. They didn't need to rush. They didn't need to fight us with our own tactics. They waited. And they took everything we had. The weight of those words hit harder than any weapon could. The silence of Earth had crushed them, had broken them in ways they couldn't have imagined. The humans had shown them the price of underestimation. Earth hadn't tried to match their technology, hadn't tried to outgun them. Earth had simply waited, watched, and then struck at the perfect moment. The COM officer spoke again, his voice shaky. Sir, Earth is sending another message. The High Commander's face grew cold. Put it through. The message appeared on the screen. It was short, almost clinical, its simplicity chilling. We told you it was not mercy. This is your last warning. Leave the galaxy. Earth will not tolerate any more attempts to control what is ours. The message ended there. No threats, no warnings of destruction. Just a simple fact. Earth had shown them mercy once. It had been the silence they had mocked. But now, that silence was gone, and the humans had spoken with their actions. The High Commander closed his eyes, a wave of defeat washing over him. There was no comeback from this. Earth had not just beaten them, they had made them realize that everything they thought they knew about power, about control, was wrong. They had believed that their advanced weapons, their fleets, their technology would give them the upper hand. But Earth's quiet, relentless approach had shattered that illusion. Sir, the COM officer said, voice barely audible. What do we do now? The High Commander's eyes flickered open, staring at the screen. The dreadnought hovered like a silent giant, casting its long shadow over their fleet. The humans had already won. They hadn't needed to destroy them outright. They had broken their spirit, crushed their confidence, and made it clear that they were no longer the dominant force in the galaxy. We surrender, the High Commander said quietly, the words almost foreign on his tongue. We surrender, and we send them a message. A message? One council member asked. What do we say? After everything, how do we respond? We send them a message of respect, the High Commander replied. Earth may have shattered us, but they've proven that we were wrong. And now we need to accept that. The comm officer hesitated for a moment before transmitting the message, their defeat now official. It read, "We surrender. You have proven us wrong. We accept your terms." As the transmission was sent, the High Commander stood tall once more, though his heart felt heavy. Their empire was gone, but humanity had shown them something important. Power wasn't just about force. It was about patience, about waiting, and about striking when the moment was right. As the remaining ships began to power down, the High Commander couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. Earth had won not by brute strength, but by their mastery of time and tactics. They had learned to wait. And now, it was the galaxy that would have to learn from them, and that was before Earth even responded. The alien fleet, once the most dominant force in the galaxy, was now little more than a shattered collection of debris. The High Commander stood at the bridge of his flagship, staring out into the cold emptiness of space. Earth's dreadnought still hovering above them, silent and commanding, had torn through their forces with devastating precision. His mind raced, but there was no escape. The end was already written. The alien empire had fallen. "What do we do now, sir?" one of the surviving council members asked, his voice quivering with uncertainty. "We've lost everything." Then the High Commander could barely respond. His mind was numb from the horror of it all. They had been so sure of themselves, so convinced of their own superiority. For centuries, they had ruled the galaxy, crushing all who stood before them. But now, they were facing the bitter truth. Their empire was crumbling because of one simple, overlooked fact. Earth had been underestimated. The silence that had preceded this moment, the silence of humanity, of Earth, had been a weapon in itself. The aliens had laughed at it, mocked it, and considered it a sign of weakness. But Earth had never needed to fight the way they had. Earth had used its silence to prepare, to wait, to strike with devastating force when the time was right. Why didn't we see it? The High Commander whispered, his voice barely audible. "Why didn't we recognize the threat?" "You couldn't have," came the voice of another council member. "We saw their weakness, their silence, and we thought it was just that. Silence. But it wasn't. They were waiting for us to make a mistake." The High Commander's eyes darkened, his fists clenching as he thought back to their arrogance. They had dismissed Earth's primitive technologies as outdated, laughable. They had underestimated the human will, the human resolve. And now, Earth had used that silence to prepare for this moment, turning their perceived weakness into a strength. They couldn't have imagined. A sharp beep cut through the silence in the command room, and the comm officer's voice rang out. "Sir, we've received another message from Earth." The High Commander straightened, his heart pounding in his chest. There was no denying it anymore. Earth had already won. The only question now was how much mercy they would show. "Put it through," the High Commander said, his voice steady but laced with defeat. The screen flickered, and a voice calm and direct filled the room. "You were warned. Your arrogance has cost you everything. Earth doesn't need to fight you. We've already won." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of their defeat. There was no anger in the message. There was no gloating. There was only finality. Earth had proven that it didn't need to destroy them in a blaze of glory. They had simply waited, and when the moment arrived, they had taken control. The High Commander's shoulders sagged as he absorbed the message. He had never been one to surrender easily, but there was no fighting back now. The alien fleet was broken. Their communications were gone. The last remaining ships were scattered, powerless to resist. They were nothing in the face of Earth's quiet power. "We've been wiped out," one of the council members said, his voice tinged with disbelief. "How did they do this? How did we fall so far?" The High Commander didn't answer. There was no answer. They had fallen because they had failed to see Earth for what it was. They had failed to understand that true power wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about patience, strategy, and knowing when to strike. It's over. The High Commander finally spoke, his voice hollow. Earth has already claimed victory. There's nothing left to fight for. One of the council members spoke again, his voice quieter now. Will they destroy us completely? They don't need to, the High Commander replied. They've already destroyed everything that mattered. Our pride, our power, our empire. They've shown us that we are nothing. Our weapons don't matter. Our ships don't matter. Earth has taken everything from us. The last of the alien fleet was now in retreat, but it was futile. Earth's dreadnought was still looming above them, unscathed, watching them as they scattered like frightened prey. The High Commander watched them flee, knowing it was the final act of a defeated empire. Sir, Earth's dreadnought is broadcasting again. The comm officer reported, his voice shaking. Let it play, the High Commander said, his voice barely above a whisper. The screen flickered again, and Earth's voice came through, clear and undisturbed by the chaos of the alien fleet's retreat. This is the end of your empire. We've waited long enough. You are no longer a threat. Consider yourselves lucky that you still exist. Leave our space and never return. The High Commander stood still, staring at the screen. Earth had made their terms clear. There was no fighting back, no recourse. They had crushed them, not by force, but by intelligence, by patience, and by waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A few minutes passed in silence. The council members were still reeling from the defeat. There was no grand speech, no desperate attempts to regroup. They had already been broken, and Earth's final message had sealed their fate. The High Commander's mind wandered back to their first thoughts about Earth, how they had laughed at the thought of a species like that challenging them. They had underestimated the humans. They had failed to see that Earth was not like the others. Earth wasn't just a planet, it was a force of nature, silent, waiting, watching, and then, when the time came, striking with a precision that no one, least of all the Council, had expected. It was over. The galaxy would never be the same again. The High Commander turned slowly, his back to the screen, the weight of his decisions weighing heavily on him. He had led his people to the end. Earth had shown them mercy by simply letting them love. But the destruction of their empire was complete, and that was before Earth even responded.